And we're live.
Welcome to Absolute Zero. I am Rachel Appel.
And I'm Bertrand Leroy.
And this
And
week,
this
it's
week,
baloney detection.
yeah, or as we also call it, bullshit detection.
Baloney.
Yeah. So this actually, there is history behind that, right?
Yep.
So a long time ago, there was a scientist. His name was Carl Sagan. And he was engaged in all kinds of science popularization. And also had a crusade against bullshit.
So much so he wrote books about it.
Yes.
Yes. And he made a little thing called a baloney detection kit.
Yes. And this comes from a chapter in his book called The Demon Haunted World. And the name of the chapter is The Fine Art of Baloney Detection. So why do we need baloney detection?
Because there is so much of it out there. So much of it. Some of it's on purpose. Some of it's agenda driven, especially in politics, sometimes in religious circles. Also, some of it's just unintentional bullshit that sounds legit, but if you start digging into it, you find out it's complete and utter BS.
Yeah, but don't we all have common sense, and isn't common sense perfectly adequate to deal with bullshit?
That's an interesting thing. So yeah, sometimes common sense prevails, but sometimes science shows us that things that appear to be nonsensical or non-intuitive are actually the way the world works.
And vice versa.
Such as the world's not flat. But if you were just to stand out and look, it might appear that way. It might appear that you could go to the end and kind of fall over if you're looking at a horizon.
Yeah, and if 20th century physics taught us anything, it's that common sense is actually completely useless with some of the reality of the world, such as quantum mechanics or relativity.
Yeah, I would say because common sense mostly applies to what I call Middle Earth. I think a couple people call it that. It's just basically the Earth that humans know. The Earth where things aren't too big, the Goldilocks zone, not too big, not too small. We're not looking at quantum level stuff here. We're not used to dealing with tiny things like that. And we're not looking at the universe. We're not used to dealing with big things like that either. We're used to human-sized stuff like food and shelter and things to survive as a human. So that Middle Earth stuff, that's what we deal with well. And common sense works there, right? And common sense is about taking risks and all about survival, right? It works there. Once you start applying it to science and the pursuit of knowledge, then it's a little different.
Yeah, and our brains are shaped by evolution and have adapted to that Middle Earth that you're talking to. There is no survival advantage in instinctively understanding quantum mechanics.
Right. None at all. As a matter of fact, it would be a detriment if we hadn't built up society nice and comfortably, just sitting around, with your pipe doing physics would get you eaten by a lion.
You know that big cat over there, that big scary cat with the teeth? I'm not sure if it's alive or dead. Might be a combination of both.
And see.
Yeah, let's put him in a box. Well, actually, that might work.
So the original Schrodinger, it took him a while.
So how about we look at that detection kit of Sagan's?
So we need it now that we have all these modern claims going around and some ancient claims that still hang around. And we have to verify if these are true because navigating our modern world, we kind of need this stuff now.
Yeah, so is Snopes a baloney detection kit?
Well, I would say it's a tool that you could have in your kit, not so much a whole complete kit in a box itself.
Yeah, it can't have everything. It can't have the most recent stuff, and it's all about memes and news. It's not really about. It's not going to debunk some popular misconceptions about evolution, for example.
Right.
Or some fringe theories about how the universe works.
Right.
That won't help with that. There are actually some pretty good resources on the net for that. For evolution, for example, there is an excellent website that has a list of common misconceptions and the scientific answer to them. It's talkorigins.org.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's excellent. It's fantastic. And then you have all kinds of rational wikis and places like that where you can find the most popular fringe theories and that sort of thing. And then there is the antithesis of that, which is Conservapedia.
Yeah.
Or Nature News, or
So that's that first item on the list, is consider the source. And
yes, so so there are resources, but you still need the Baloney detection kit or something similar to tell those sources apart and distinguish something great like Talk Origins from something like Natural News or the Food Babe or crap like that.
Right. So
okay.
You need to find out who the experts are in any particular area and look at those sites. Might be hard if you're not in that area, but what you'll start to see is eventually you'll start to see a bit of scientific consensus where a lot of scientists tend to agree on a particular and have worked in a field and agree on a particular stance. So that kind of helps to figure out which way the evidence is tilting.
Yeah. So how about we look at the actual
the kit. So it's a 10-point set of questions to ask, and the first one is, how reliable is the source of the claim? So we know that Snopes is a fact-checking. There's also, for politics, you have PolitiFact and a couple others. So there are fact-checkers, and then fact-checking at some news stations. Now, of course, no source is ever going to be perfect, right? They all make mistakes, and they all have little slants to them about certain things. All right, so just have to be aware of that.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, because you weren't saying anything, so I thought you were going to go to the next point.
Oh, okay. So the second point is, does the source make similar claims? So that's kind of intertwines with the actual, see what the source is. Have the claims been verified by somebody else? So that's what I was saying before about consensus. And if you find material on university websites, it tends to be from actual research in the field by experts. So it tends to, as a tool, it tends to have more credibility. It actually comes from any university except Trump University. Except for that one.
Well, okay, so that used to be easier, because now we know that there are some
there are a couple that are
bogus peer-reviewed journals, and they are peer-reviewed and they are journals, but all the information in there is crap. I think there is one called the Journal of Cosmology or something like that.
Yes.
That is 100% crap. And then you have fake scientific institutes, such as the Discovery Institute here in Seattle.
Right.
So how do we tell between people with lab coats pretending to be scientists and real scientists when we don't have the expertise ourselves.
Yeah, you're going to need to put some time into it, I think, right? And go through and investigate these things pretty deeply in some cases, right? Depending on how important it is to you.
Yeah, so I think the Carl Sagan's detection kit is not it's not something that is going to be foolproof, and it's just some tool that you can use to without all the obviously, well, not so obviously, but all the noise, let's say, and focus on the claims that at least seem to have some merit.
Right.
Because there is such an influx of bullshit that we need to deflect that somehow, right? In especially now that we have social media, which Carl Sagan didn't have. We really have a permanent flux of stuff coming our way, and we need something like that to not waste too much time on stuff that isn't worth it.
Right. Yeah, all of these questions are like that. They try to help us figure out whether it's worth it to continue to pursue. Things like, does it fit in the way the world works? Well, that could be subjective, I think. Has anyone tried to disprove this claim? I would say, why don't you actually try to disprove the claim yourself as well whenever you hear something, especially if you see something, say, maybe passed around on social media, and you see that and you say, oh, I agree with that. The minute you say that, stop, and then try to go find out the opposite of it and disprove yourself. Try to get into the pattern of doing that. So it's fighting confirmation bias, which is your natural tendency to confirm things that you say, oh, yeah, that looks good. So it's kind of fighting that bias and then helping you keep balance.
Yeah. So back when I was doing research in physics, I got something in my email at least once a week from somebody claiming to have a theory that was solving this or that problem, and in some cases, universal theory of everything, and that raises immediate red lights.
Oh, right, and that's a redundant title.
Yeah, so those have something in common. A few things in common, in particular, that distinguish them from real science. And one of them is that the claims are always grandiose, but the amount of evidence is inversely proportional to the grandiosity of the claim. And they are almost always very theoretical. They try to convince you on abstract points instead of using experimentation to convince you.
Yes, I would say that's, we can file this under, if it sounds really good to be true, it probably is too good to be true.
Yeah. And the personality of the person making the claim is also sometimes very important. By which I mean somebody who claims to be a genius, for example, and that happens all the time. That's usually, if you look at most famous scientists, most of them are actually pretty humble.
Yeah, if someone approaches and says, I'm a genius and I have the theory of everything solved, I'm pretty sure just the answer is no, you're not. And it would be, actually, the press would have picked up on it by now. You wouldn't be coming to me with it.
Yeah, and
or any random researcher. Yes. So. Well, you probably had gotten this before, just working at Microsoft, and I do more stuff in the public, like direct with people. So you get people that would come up to you at shows and stuff, and they would be like, well, hey, I have this idea and I can make Microsoft, hundreds of millions of dollars. And they always say it like, A, do you know how much money we have? Because we already have it. B, no, I don't think you actually have this idea that's going to revolutionize the company.
Yeah, so I think
it's always something we already tried too.
So in our line of work, I've come up with the conclusion that the equivalent of theory of everything is Facebook killer or whatever killer. If something is a something killer, well, just forget it. Yep, First, the idea has no originality, and no, it's not going to kill Facebook. No.
Right. Yep. So stuff like that, grandiose claims that are just a little too good to be true.
Yeah, and claiming that the whole scientific community is wrong.
Yeah, no, sometimes it's just you.
Yeah, it's on the face of it, comparing the probabilities of the whole community being wrong and you being wrong, well,
if I had to put money down on it, I'm not going to put money on the individual. I'm going to put it on the community. Yeah.
So, then if they raise Galileo, that's another big red flag. You're not Galileo, you're not Einstein, you're not...
Right.
Well, probably not. And if you are, please demonstrate it.
Right, they should be able to easily. Yep.
Yeah, so that's the thing. If you have something valid, let it speak for itself instead of trying to put your personality forward. Nobody cares, right? Yeah, and what you said about trying to prove oneself wrong, that's another thing which many people don't grasp. It's that what scientists are actually doing most of the time is to prove everything wrong.
Yes.
What the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland is doing is nothing but that. It's, trying to find stuff that goes against the standard model.
As a matter of fact, the scientist that does go against the grain and is able to prove things wrong is going to get a lot of attention.
He's going to be celebrated and
very notable scientist, because that's what's happened with every kind of breakthrough in science. Every time there was a usurpation like that.
Yes, and science is a process, not a body of knowledge.
Right, right. It's the journey, not the destination.
Yeah, so if you have something valuable to bring to science, please follow the process.
Yeah.
And the process is not to send random emails to researchers in labs and telling them about your amazing discovery. The process is to, well, it's a scientific process. So
some other things to watch out for is, because I see it in the media so often, is equivalency, the way it's presented. So as you look for information, you'll come across regular news articles that are reporting on scientific breakthroughs, and often they do a couple of things. They present multiple sides of an argument as if they all have equal weight, and they don't. Often you have the 99 scientists who are like, yes, gravity is a theory, it pretty much works, we're good. And somebody over here going, nah, airplanes fly, that renders the theory wrong. That one person over there. No, that person does not have equal weight in their theory, in little scare air quotes. So consider that. Just because there are two people discussing something doesn't mean that it's 50-50, that their opinions are weighted equally, especially when it's not an actual peer-reviewed article that you're reading, when it's news. Because even they might be reporting on science, but they still have a job that's driven by metrics. So,
yeah. Did we talk about independent confirmation?
Not specifically.
Okay, so wherever possible, there must be independent confirmation of the facts or what's presented as facts. So yeah, if
consensus would help with that.
Hmm?
Looking for consensus would help with that.
Yeah, well, and part of the scientific process is that confirmation. If you look at something like water memory, for example, that's something that has never been reproduced. So,
right.
Yeah, and encouraging debate instead of trying to silence it. That's also a strong differentiator between somebody who's trying to find the truth and somebody who's trying to impose his ideas.
Yes, you often see shutdown tactics in arguments or in discussions where people will even outright ask, no, I don't think you should criticize because, well, no, if you already have a valid idea, then you should welcome criticism to that idea, right?
Yeah.
If it holds water, it'll hold up to it. So
it will make it stronger.
Right. Yeah, actually, that's exactly what will happen. So things like that, or using little tactics to try to shut down an argument. You can usually tell when people are trying to do that.
Spin more than one hypothesis. This makes me think of, well, this is the only explanation I can think of, therefore it must be true. Well, look for more.
Because you can think of only that doesn't mean other people can't think of other explanations that are perfectly valid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Try not to get overly attached to a hypothesis because it's yours. That's very hard to do, actually.
It is. It becomes a pet the minute it becomes yours.
Yeah.
And then people don't want to give it up. Because it also becomes a belief, I think, as well. And then once it becomes a belief, then that's it. It's hard to shake.
Yeah. Quantify. Sorry.
No, and the whole deal with the belief is that you're going to hold on to it despite the fact that there's good evidence against it or no evidence for it. That's why, in fact, it is a belief. So.
Quantify. If whatever it is you're explaining has some measure, some numerical quantity attached to it, you'll be much better able to discriminate among competing hypotheses. And that's actually, well, there are some things that are very counterintuitive, and where the only way to settle a debate is to do the math or and confront it to reality. Quantum mechanics, for example.
Something else too about quantifying. When you read news articles about things, you can watch for weasel words. Whenever they have a chance to tell you, X amount of things happen, or there was a little piece going around recently. It's one of those, you could see it, I could tell immediately it's BS. But for fun, I'm going to agree with it anyway. And it says, if you have some wine before you go to bed, will that help you lose a little bit more weight? Sure, it sounds great. I'll go with it.
That sounds great.
It's complete BS. I can tell just by reading it. It just sounds like BS, right? Or else, like, we wouldn't have noticed this by now. How long have humans been drinking wine, right?
Well,
I mean, so what it is they drew out this little fact that some of the antioxidants that are in certain wines can help in lab rats convert one of the types of fat to a different type that burns a little faster. And they extrapolated that out to humans should have some wine before bed because it helps you lose weight. So, hey, I'll take it, but mostly just for the fun of it, not for any kind of actual real scientific validity. But a lot of people were actually kind of latching on to this, with wishful thinking being at the very forefront of it all, but really believing it. And so I thought that was a bit of irresponsible journalism for a lot of people, passing that around. The journalists writing that up, but that perfectly fits in with it, right? They didn't quantify and say how much wine you should have, how many days you should have it. You have no numbers. The sources.
And quantifying the results as well.
Right. The sources, if you look around, a lot of them were tabloid sources. Just from a quick Google.
There is another thing that comes with quantification of a claim. It's margin of error.
Yeah. No mention of this kind of stuff in the articles. Just drink some wine. It's fat burning stuff, I
always say that all scientific results come with error bars, and that's true. Every time you have a scientific result, there are some numbers that come with it, and those numbers have an error bar, so you can know by how much they are wrong, by how much they can be wrong.
Right.
And if you don't have any quantification, you cannot know by how much you're wrong. And as everything is some approximation, then, well, how much of an approximation is it?
Right.
Next one is, if there is a chain of argument, every link in the chain must work, including the premise. And this is really very, very useful. And that's something that we none of us does enough of that. When some reasoning is presented, including especially your own reasoning, you should examine every single link in it and try to falsify it. And writing things down and expressing them to somebody else is sometimes a good way of doing that, because you realize your own errors in reasoning by verbalizing them.
Best way to find alternative viewpoints is just write it down in bullet point form and then post it on Facebook. And within minutes, you will get alternate viewpoints.
Yes,
and if you don't, you might be in if you don't, you might be in an echo chamber and you might be participating in confirmation bias a little more than you know.
Yes. And that's also about welcoming feedback instead of being hostile to opposition. And of course, we have Occam's razor.
Oh, yeah. The simplest explanation is most likely it.
Yeah. So this comes with caveats, of course.
It wasn't aliens. It was just a planet or a star.
Yeah, it's the assumption that something that looks new is probably mundane.
Right.
So it's also...
that's not Jesus in the toast. It's just that humans seek patterns.
Yeah. It's about the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis is that your basic assumption is that things are normal, and if they deviate from normalcy, that's the claim that needs to be verified.
Yep.
Yeah, and then you have falsification, actually.
So is it good enough a claim to be falsifiable, or can people actually judge and verify this claim, or is it utterly ridiculous, like saying you have an invisible elephant in your pocket? There's no way to verify that or test it. So then that falls outside of the realm of something that's scientifically testable.
Yeah, and what you just said is another thing that we owe Carl Sagan. It's the idea of the dragon in the garage.
Yep.
And he has a whole argument. I think it's in the same book.
It is.
It's in the Demon Hunted World. Yeah. The idea that I have a dragon in my garage, Oh, okay. Well, can we go and oh yeah, there it is. Yeah.
Of course I have the book.
Can we go and look at that dragon? Oh no, you can't because it's invisible. Oh,
Right.
okay. Well then, can I touch it maybe?
No.
Oh no, it's also completely intangible. You cannot touch it.
So we could test it to see if it's in your garage by throwing flour on the floor, except, oh, guess what? It levitates. So you'll never see the
Yes.
footprints.
So there is
Isn't this
always an
all
excuse.
convenient? Right. So convenient.
And
Too
something
good to
that
be
has
true.
no effect onto the world might as well not exist.
Right. Right.
So the next thing that Sagan does after looking at those tools, those various tools to try to detect baloney, is that he looks at some logical fallacies.
Yeah.
It's an interesting list. I mean, it's not complete, but it's interesting.
No, and he hits a lot of the main ones, like confirmation bias is a big one that everybody does.
Should we look at those?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so he starts with ad hominem, and that's when you attack the person rather than attacking the ideas.
Yeah, you see this in politics a lot. Politician A, it doesn't matter what they say, anything any politician says, politician B will just attack politician A because they're a horrible person, or whatever it is. They eat babies or whatever politicians do. They probably do. They're politicians. But, that's how that works, right? They just lob mud at people instead of sticking to the actual content of the discussion. And it's a diversionary tactic, right, to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And he always gives some funny examples. So his example for an ad hominem is the Reverend Dr. Smith is a non-biblical fundamentalist, so her objections to evolution need not be taken seriously. Well, let's look at the argument, not who's making it. Then he has argument from authority, and his example is a little funny because it kind of dates the book. President Richard Nixon should be re-elected because he has a secret plan to end the war in Southeast Asia. So yeah, that's an old book.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the idea. Here we are supposed to take at face value that the president does have a plan because he's the president, so he must have a plan.
Right. Yeah, he's the president. I doubt that they'd ever lie to you. Where we heard this stuff like that before too. So
especially Nixon. Nixon is well known for being reliable and honest and so on. So.
Yes, that's another one that authority.
Oh, I love this one. Sorry.
I saw the non sequitur in there, which is kind of easy. It doesn't follow, right? That's Latin for it doesn't follow. Yeah, so people say one thing and then they immediately just kind of veer off into left field, and you don't. It often doesn't even make sense, or it doesn't have much to do with. They just kind of went off on a non-logical spree.
Mm-hmm. Then we have argument from adverse consequences, and again the example is funny. A god meting out punishment and reward must exist because if he didn't, society would be much more lawless and dangerous, perhaps even ungovernable. So that's his first example, and he has another one. The defendant in the widely publicized murder trial must be found guilty, otherwise it will be an encouragement for other men to murder their wives.
Interesting.
I find that one really interesting because
I find it more of a threat almost than an argument, right? That's almost a threat.
That's true.
The way that's posed.
So we have a lot of cases of police violence recently, right?
Yeah.
And police getting away with literally murder.
Yeah.
Couldn't you apply that argument here?
I think you could.
Would it be bad?
Quite possibly. Let's see. Well, if you had just did everything that they said, then you wouldn't get shot. But then what about the one who did do everything that they said and got shot anyway?
Yeah. And yeah, we also have another example in recent news. All those young men, all those promising white young men who were who got a slap on the wrist for raping women.
Right.
Yeah, rape is frowned upon in our societies. Yeah, so I don't know about that example. It seems to be a little argument from adverse consequences. Well,
yeah, but saying, oh, if you don't do this, bad things will happen.
Yeah, so maybe it's not the best example.
But people use it.
Yeah. So yeah, if the only reason you want to condemn that person to go to jail is the consequences of not doing so, yeah, sure, that's bad. But when you have a systematic leniency for a certain category of population in a society, that isn't good either. So,
right.
Well, but that's probably a diversion from the topic here. Appeal to ignorance, the claim that whatever has not been proved false must be true and vice versa. And the example here is that there is no compelling evidence that UFOs have not visited the Earth, therefore UFOs exist and there is intelligent life elsewhere in the universe. Well, yeah, well, there are many more ways to be wrong than to be right. So it's not enough to not have been proved false, because you can't really completely rule out fairies or
anything
in
else.
orbit around the Earth or whatever. Special pleading, also known as hypocrisy. Example here for special pleading is: how can a merciful God condemn future generations to torment because against orders one woman induced one man to eat an apple? And the special pleading is: you don't understand the subtle doctrine of free will. So it's special pleading because it's creating arguments to justify one specific case.
Right, and it's simply saying, well, you don't understand it.
Also,
that literally doesn't mean anything except that there's there's a lot of people that maybe don't understand it. Does that mean you do either? No, it doesn't. And it doesn't mean it's right, and it doesn't mean it's wrong. It literally means nothing.
And as a side note, here we can see how Carl Sagan was a very strong atheist. He wasn't mincing words here. And his examples are very, very specific. So yeah, everything you hear about new atheism, that's actually old atheism. It has been here for a while. Begging the question, also called assuming the answer. And actually, yeah, I think it's one of those expressions that have where the colloquial sense has taken over, and the original sense of the expression is almost never used anymore, and it would be pedantic to insist on it. So yeah, assuming the answer. So it's a form of circular reasoning.
Yep.
For example, we must institute the death penalty to discourage violent crime. We must institute the death penalty to discourage violent crime. But does the violent crime rate in fact fall when the death penalty is imposed? Or another one is the stock market fell yesterday because of a technical adjustment and profit taking by investors. But is there any independent evidence for the causal role of adjustment and profit taking? Have we learned anything at all from this purported explanation? Yeah. Observational selection, also called cherry picking, where you take the hits and ignore the misses.
That's a very popular thing that people do, especially in politics.
In politics, again.
Yeah.
So
my candidate has all the yummy cherries, and your candidate has all the pits. It's basically
basically that's it. So yeah, can we say that politics is the art of logical fallacy?
Yeah.
Statistics in small numbers. They say 1 out of every 5 people is Chinese. How is this possible? I know hundreds of people and none of them is Chinese.
Oh, that's perfect. The white person from Idaho, right?
Yeah. I've thrown 3 sevens in a row. Tonight I cannot lose. And of course there is misunderstanding of the nature of statistics. Also common. President Eisenhower expressing astonishment and alarm on discovering that fully half of all Americans have below average intelligence.
Oh my God, that many? Wow.
That is horrible. We need to do something about that.
Which also reminds me of like the Lake Wobegon bias, right? In which everybody thinks that they're a little bit better than they are. Like they think they're a better driver, they think they're more intelligent, and by definition, only somebody can be, above average and below average. And, when it comes down to it, statistically, it's probably not you.
Yeah.
Outside of the bell curve wildly. You're probably in the bell with most people.
We talked about non sequitur. Post hoc ergo propter hoc, which is Latin for it happened after, so it was caused by.
Yeah. Hindsight is golden.
Yeah. I know of a 26-year-old who looks 60 because she takes contraceptive pills. Or before women, you're going to love that one. Before women got the vote, there were no nuclear weapons. That is true.
See what happened.
Yeah. There is an anecdote here about the argument from adverse consequences. And Sagan is retelling this anecdote that was about Enrico Fermi, who was an Italian physicist, very famous, who had just arrived on American shores, who got enlisted in the Manhattan Project, and brought face-to-face in the midst of World War II with US flag officers. So-and-so is a great general, he was told. What is the definition of a great general? Fermi characteristically asked, I guess it's a general who's won many consecutive battles. How many? After some back and forth, they settled on 5. What fraction of American generals are great? After some more back and forth, they settled on a few percent. But imagine, Fermi rejoined, that there is no such thing as a great general, that all armies are equally matched, and that winning a battle is purely a matter of chance. Then the chance of winning one battle is 1 out of 2. 2 battles, 1 out of 4, 3, 1 out of 8, 4, 1 out of 16, 1 out of 16, and 5 consecutive battles, 1 out of 32, which is about 3%. You would expect a few percent of American generals to win 5 consecutive battles purely by chance. Now, has any of them won 10 consecutive battles? So that's an interesting example of looking at things not the way they appear, but trying to quantify them. And this is a really scientific approach, trying to distinguish the claim from, is the claim really not mundane? Oh, and we're not done. There is more. Yeah, you talked about weasel words before. Suppressed evidence or half-truths. That's also very common. People who want to convince you of something. We are only present.
The good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, the good stuff, and that's cherry picking.
Sounds like Scientology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know how I love those guys. Strawman. That's very common as well. It's attacking a position that is not. It's attacking a position that is easier to attack than the real one.
Right, and usually that thing you're attacking, the attacker is often the one who posits this to begin with, right? They prop it up and then they attack it usually. But if it's one of your lesser arguments that they attack, it's usually one that's not really that relevant to the conversation at hand. It's kind of a sidebar usually. And then therefore it's not that important.
Yeah. The example here is scientists suppose that living things simply fell together by chance. And no scientist
Nobody says that, right?
False dichotomy. That's a great one as well.
Giving an either or kind of.
Yes, either you love your country or you hate it.
You're for us or against us. Well, the world is often more complex than for or against, black and white.
Yeah.
So often just those two choices don't work.
And the slippery slope. If we allow abortion in the first few weeks of pregnancy, it will be impossible to prevent the killing of a full-term infant.
Yeah, except it's easy to put brakes on laws.
Yeah. Confusion of correlation and causation. Didn't we do a whole show about this one?
I think so.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so all those biases, right? It's not like you'll have time to go through the list of every one of them, but it's not a bad idea to go through and review them. And as you are participating in discussions or trying to figure out things like who you're going to vote for, what your position is on something, it doesn't hurt to go through this list and say, where am I doing any of these things? Write down your position and then look through that list and say, am I doing that? And can I change it?
Yes, exactly. And I was going to say something similar, which is that most people understand and agree about those logical fallacies, but it's usually to point out the straw that is in somebody else's eye, right? But what's important is to try to apply it to yourself.
Yeah. It's a little harder because you have all those built-in biases, right, that are always working against you, right? It's a lot once again, it's a lot easier to find that in other people. But the more you find it in yourself, then that's the, sharper your logic skills get, the more that you can point out and start to see where you can correct your position a bit. So, and then pretty soon it becomes that you're actually kind of you view it positively, where a lot of people approach it and it's kind of a negative. You get like a little pang of negativity when you realize that something is not quite correct in your hypotheses, and then you have to adjust it. right? And that's a problem for people, right? Changing a belief. But if we try to approach that with an attitude of positivity around changing your beliefs, when there's evidence presented to do so, that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I think we all really like to win arguments.
Right. This is the argument you need to have with yourself before you take it to other people.
Yeah, well, a good thing is that it's actually easier to win an argument if you're right. So.
Yes, there's that. Well, I guess it depends on who you're arguing with. If it's an idiot, then they just storm out of the room and you have no idea what happened. Right.
Yes. Sometimes, yeah. Arguing is like trying to play chess with
a pigeon. Yeah, they just crap all over the board, knock the pieces over, and strut around like they won.
Yes.
There are people like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need a fallacy just for that.
Yeah. And it all comes down to intellectual honesty.
Right.
If what you want is to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible, and I told that to Matt Dillahunty, well, if that is your goal, then you should try to find methods to reach those goals. Scientific method is not a bad one for that. And knowing your fallacy, your own fallacies, is another.
Right.
Cool. What else?
We got through the list of the big stuff.
Yeah. Well, let's end here then.
Okay.
Cool. Do you have an idea for a subject next week?
No, not off the top.
We have lots. I'm sure we have.
Yeah, we have stuff in our notebook. Plus, I downloaded another course, so
okay.
Cool. So I'll see what's in there.
Yeah, we could do faster than light.
Ooh.
That's interesting. We have a few. Okay, well, we don't have to decide now. Bye, everyone.
Till next time.